Ever feel like just melting in the summer heat?
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, imagine being a newborn fawn in South Texas.
Yikes, that's a whole other level.
We're diving into this article from the Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute.
Growing up in a sauna. Catchy title.
It is. We're going to figure out how this crazy heat impacts fawn development.
And what that means for, the people managing the wildlife.
Exactly. And spoiler alert, it's not just about predators and finding enough to eat.
So there's more to it.
Oh yeah, this heat's playing a bigger role than you might think.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So picture South Texas in the summer.
Scorching.
That's putting it mildly. It's some of the most intense heat white-tailed deer experience, period.
Wow, across their whole range. That's saying something.
And often you've got droughts happening right alongside that heat.
Double whammy. We know that already makes life tough for fawns.
Right. Less food, less cover. It's a struggle. But this research is suggesting there's an extra layer to it.
Really? Like what?
Even when those fawns get supplemental food, drought years still mean fewer fawns making it.
Huh. So it's not just about having enough to eat.
That's what made these researchers think, hold on, maybe the heat itself is a bigger problem than we thought.
Makes sense. But how do you figure that out? It's not like they can interview the fawns, right?
Right, so they got creative. The Caesar Kleberg Institute has this place, the Alkek Captive Ungulate Facility.
Ungulate, meaning hooved animals.
Yep, deer, antelope, that sort of thing.
Okay, so what did they do with these fawns?
They raised them in 2 separate groups, one with AC, one without.
So a side-by-side comparison. Controlling for everything except the temperature.
You got it, like a scientific control group isolating the effects of the heat.
Smart. What did they find out?
The differences were pretty wild. Fawns in the cooler environment, way bigger at weaning time.
Way bigger. How much are we talking?
9% heavier.
9%. That's not insignificant.
No, not at all. And that wasn't the only difference.
Okay, what else?
They drank more milk, too, in that first month of life, like 4% more.
So healthier appetite, maybe faster metabolism, because they're not just battling the heat constantly.
That's the thinking. But they took it a step further and looked at stress hormone levels.
That's where it gets really interesting.
You said it. Fawns in the cooler environment had 40% lower stress hormones.
40%. Wow. Being stressed all the time can't be good for a growing fawn.
Exactly. It takes a toll. Big time. So now we gotta ask, what does that mean for a fawn out in the real world trying to survive in South Texas?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to unpack next.
All right, I'm ready when you are. Okay, so we've got these fawns. They're out there dealing with this crazy heat. Their stress hormones are going haywire.
Right, and it really makes you appreciate the importance of what biologists call thermal cover.
Thermal cover. So basically the fawn's version of AC, right?
Exactly. Think shade, those thick patches of brush where they can escape the sun.
Okay, so like a nice dense thicket. Those are good for more than just hiding from predators, huh?
Nope, it's about more than just shade from trees, though. It's also about the ground cover.
Ground cover? How does that play into it?
Well, think about it. Things like those thick grasses and shrubs can help insulate the ground, keep it cooler.
Oh, that makes sense. And of course, they need water, too. Got to stay hydrated and all that heat.
Absolutely, water sources are essential. But back to the thermal cover. Knowing all this, what can wildlife managers actually do?
Yeah, how do you actually help these fawns beat the heat?
It all comes down to habitat management, really. They've got to make sure those thermal refuges are there and prioritize creating more of them.
So like protecting those dense brush areas, especially along, what was it, the cooler drainages?
Exactly, those are prime spots. Or they could be planting native vegetation, stuff that'll provide good ground cover and shade.
So it's not just about keeping them safe from predators, it's about keeping them safe from the heat itself.
You got it. And this research is saying just providing more food might not cut it.
Yeah, gotta look at the whole picture. Especially as the temperatures keep going up, those fawns need a place to cool down.
Couldn't agree more. And it makes you think, if heat's impacting fawns this much in South Texas, what about other species?
Right, what about animals in other places, other parts of the world that are getting hotter?
Especially the ones that are already living right at the edge of what they can handle, heat-wise.
I never thought of it that way. It's like the study is a warning, like, hey, pay attention, you might be missing something here.
Exactly. There could be all these impacts we're not even thinking about. Maybe we need to ask ourselves, what else are we missing?
What other ways is climate change affecting wildlife that we haven't even realized yet? That's a good question to keep in mind.
I think so too. It really highlights how much more research we need and how important it is to keep an open mind. be ready to adapt.
What worked in the past might not work in the future, especially with a warmer world. Makes you realize how complex this whole thing is.
For sure. And for me, what's really interesting is that the fawns in that hotter environment, even with the extra food, they never really caught up.
You mean growth-wise, even though they had enough to eat?
Exactly. Shows you how that heat stress can have a real lasting impact, even if they don't starve.
It's not just a temporary setback. It affects their development at a basic level.
And it all comes back to thermal cover. It's not some extra perk. It's crucial for them to survive and thrive.
This is all really thought-provoking stuff. It makes you realize how much we still have to learn about heat and its impact on these animals.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're always learning, always needing to adjust our approach to conservation.
It's a big responsibility for sure, but it's also exciting, to think about all the discoveries that are still out there.
It really is. And those discoveries, that's what will help us create a better future for these animals, for the whole ecosystem.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Maybe it's time to step back for a minute, let our listener take it all in.
I agree. Let's recap the key takeaway messages.
Perfect. And then maybe leave them with something to think about. Ready for part 3?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've gone through all this research about these fawns and how heat impacts them.
Yeah, more than we might have realized, right?
Definitely. So for our listeners, maybe catching bits and pieces while they're out and about, what's the big takeaway here?
The main thing to remember is that heat isn't just some side problem for fawns.
It's hitting them directly.
Exactly. It's directly affecting how they grow, how they develop, and, whether they survive.
We always hear about predators and not enough food, but this is saying the heat itself is a huge factor.
And as it gets hotter, it's only going to get more important.
It's like a whole new way of looking at things. I know I'll never think about shade the same way again.
Yeah, it's not just a comfy spot to relax anymore.
It could literally be the difference between life and death for a fawn out there in that heat.
Makes you think about those fawns in South Texas just baking in the sun. And then it makes you wonder about other species too.
Right. What about all those animals in other parts of the world that are already at their limit heat-wise?
How are they going to cope?
It's a big question. This research is almost like a wake-up call.
Like it's saying, hey, pay attention. There's more going on here than we might realize.
Maybe there are all these other impacts from climate change that we haven't even noticed yet.
What are we missing? That's what we need to figure out.
Yeah, and it means we need more research, more people out there studying these animals and how they're reacting to the heat.
And we got to be open to changing how we approach conservation.
What worked in the past might not work anymore, that's for sure. This has been such a fascinating deep dive. It really shows how much we can learn from just one study.
And it shows how important it is to have scientists out there asking these tough questions.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're all connected. What we do affects these animals and their environment.
The choices we make today will have consequences down the road.
Well said. To everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of fawns and, saunas, I guess. It's a complex issue, but hopefully you've learned something new about the challenges they face.
And what we can do to help.
Exactly. And the next time you see a deer, maybe take a moment to appreciate how tough they are.
And how incredible the whole ecosystem is.
It's a fragile balance, but hey, stay curious. There's always more to learn.
That's the truth.